a monster, Zod. And I'm gonna stop you.
Power. One of the many things the Snyderverse nailed better than the rest of the superhero genre when it comes to movies. Starting with Man of Steel till the end of the Snyderverse with Justice League, we've never seen heavy-hitter, godlike superheroes brawl in a way that really sold that the characters with super strength were in a whole nother league, with their environmental destruction caused by their strikes, and oomph with each of their attacks. So much so that the destruction caused Batman to punch far above his weight class in BVS when he stole kryptonite from Lex, just to have a chance at challenging Superman, as nothing Batman could do could harm Superman, as amazingly demonstrated by the Batmobile being unchallenged when it tore through Lex's crew only to do nothing to Superman, as he stopped it in like 3 seconds, truly showing the difference between a man and Superman. The same can't be said with the MCU with their very strong mainstream characters like Hulk, Thor, and Thanos. Sure, you get some strength feats every now and then that are cool to see, but this doesn't hold its consistency, as Hulk, who's supposed to be the strongest there is, takes L's after his first solid movie and his moment in the first Avengers movie, as he loses to the man-made Iron Man Hulkbuster. He loses to an unarmed Thor and then Thanos. Sure, most of those people he lost to aren't sleeper characters, but Hulk's supposed to be the strongest there is. The losses should be more rare and hard fought. And most of the scenes he loses in doesn't give anywhere near as much oomph as Superman vs. Zod or Doomsday, with the exception of like 2 shots in the Hulk vs. Hulkbuster fight. But then we get to the lack of consistency in portraying the differences between the heavy hitters and normal people and their technology. Thanos, without using an Infinity Stone, easily beats Hulk in literally less than a minute with little environmental destruction at all. Less so than less powerful characters in the Raimi movies. Strongest there is, eh? Hulk is supposed to be Marvel's Superman in terms of being the main powerhouse, and that's how they treat him. Iron Man and Doctor Strange put up a better fight against Thanos, which doesn't make any sense. Thanos doesn't make any sense either. He mops the floor with Hulk, but then a human like Star-Lord hits Thanos hard enough to make his head move. Despite being related to Ego, which isn't anything from the comics by the way, Star-Lord does not have super strength. Star-Lord hitting Thanos should have went like this scene in BVS. It not being like that is as goofy as Black Widow kicking Hulk in the head and having Hulk's head move. Maybe you can call that nitpicky, but it gets worse when Thanos gets the Reality Stone that allows him to easily turn Drax into a bunch of stones, Mantis into paper mache, and Star-Lord's laser bolts into bubbles. At that point, Thanos has already won. So how the hell are other characters like Iron Man, Spider-Man, and the Guardians of the Galaxy fighting him later? In the comic named Infinity Gauntlet, which is totally different from the movie, it works in a way that isn't as badly written despite him having the same power set, due to that comic specifically stating that Thanos was toying with the heroes for fun, and how Adam Warlock, through means involving the Soul Stone, discovered that Thanos subconsciously wanted to lose because he felt unworthy of the godlike powers he took. Adam Warlock is a wise man in the comics, unlike Gunn making him a goofball in the movie. Hell, Thanos has selfish motivations to please Death by killing half of all life to please her, which is entirely different from the noble intentions in the movie. It's beyond me how BVS gets called inaccurate when it's objectively as close to its comic as movies get, as opposed to all of these MCU 180s, by far. But anyway, speaking of that, we circle back to the Snyder parts of the DCEU where the power of these higher tier characters are respected way more, with better consistency. Every time Batman did damage to Superman, it was right after using kryptonite, and then Batman got thwomped and couldn't do anything every time it wore off. But the fight scene with Doomsday really shows this off, not just with the oomph of the strikes of Wonder Woman and Superman fighting Doomsday, but with how Batman is forced into being the tactical observer, waiting for an opportunity to shoot his last kryptonite round in a way that matters, as he's forced to run away the second Doomsday pays him any attention, because if Doomsday gets him, he could very well die instantly. He barely gets away by the skin of his teeth, and even the mere act of escaping that is badass still, due to his human limitations. This film still goes out of its way to show Batman as something far beyond human with his strength and speed, a true creature of the night, but they still respect that he can't do too much against the people who could take down buildings with ease. Like this shot here of him just observing all of the chaos, not only does it show the difference between these powerful beings and Batman, but it shows how nice of a guy Superman was for having restraint. If Superman put a quarter of that super strength and speed he threw at Doomsday towards Batman instead, then Batman would have been cooked at the very beginning of the fight. Regardless of his plan that was reliant on a Superman who was holding back, that endless mercy of Superman was probably another thing Batman felt guilty about before the end of the fight, where Batman still contributes when the opportunity to get a shot off presents itself, and when he takes a shot we get a look of despair on his face when he knows that Superman likely won't make it out of this, as Wonder Woman gives it her all to restrain Doomsday before Superman lands a finishing blow with a spear that was meant to kill him. All of this happening with a Hans Zimmer soundtrack going hard, one of the hardest sacrifices that he already gave its own full video. All this makes for my favorite action ever in superhero movies. The MCU still has some decent fight scenes, but most of them are just good as more street level fights with Winter Soldier versus Cap, or more Cap fights in Civil War. Spider-Man, no matter what adaptation we go with, mostly Raimi though. But that's not the same type of action as Superman, Wonder Woman, or even Black Adam, which does a better job at portraying that tier of strength as well. And even when it comes to those good Marvel street tier fights I mentioned, I wouldn't put them on the level of that BVS warehouse scene with the exception of Raimi's Spider-Man. Batman vs. Deathstroke was probably something that would have blown them out of the water too if we got to see it. I think I've already nailed the point of DC having better cinematic strength consistency than the MCU, but it even applies to other media that don't do as good of a job. Like the DC animated universes where Darkseid loses an eye to a crowbar, Batman moves Darkseid with a dropkick, Batman dodging an Omega Beam. Hell, even other animated shows, whether it be Western or anime, like when Invincible throws a baseball around the entire globe, but a robot made by one person in some grimy lair ends up restraining Invincible. Or any anime where they take a human character but end up making them far beyond human, even more than what Snyder already did with Batman. The scaling doesn't have to be perfect, as I know we can get real geeky about how characters with super speed should never get hit, but that's just some minor suspension of disbelief that one has to have with every character that has super speed, and I really mean all of them. But anyway, overall, that's just how I feel about the difference between prime Snyder DCEU fights versus the MCU and a bunch of other examples. I think DC films are definitely deeper than Marvel, hence I'm having better rated and better sold comics, in tandem with DC getting more cinematic praise via Oscar nominations for Best Picture and 3 Best Actor awards. But even if you just want to see something get punched really hard, DC still wins at that, in my opinion. Despite what the internet tells susceptible minds to think, DC is what I see as the best portrayal of power. But anyway, check out my media and my Linktree, like my Discord server and Twitter, along with checking out many other pro Snyderverse videos I have. Thanks for watching.